Well, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Pol from Manipal University. It is an honor and a privilege to have you join us today in today's podcast episode. The date right now is October 4th, 2024, and we are connecting with you. So thank you very much for signing the consent form and giving your permission to be part of this voluntary study. You've had a chance to look at the interview questions and you understand the welcome letter and the purpose of this podcast. Is this correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. So before we do a deep dive into each of the questions, if you can just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself so they have an idea of who you are, and you can tell as much or as little as you would like about your positionality, where you're located, anything you want, personal details or professional details, whatever you would like to share with the viewers.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Prabodhan Pol. I teach at Manipal Academy of Higher Education. It is a university which is based in southern part of India, and I have been working in Manipal for last 6 years. And before I started working here, I was also teaching at Delhi University, and I finished my PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and I also, in fact, have experience of working at two very prominent colleges of Delhi University. One was Ramjas College, and the other was Miranda House College of Women. So I have been teaching for last 8.5 years, and I teach history, and my work basically is on history of anti-caste movement. My PhD was specifically focusing the history of Marathi journalism, vernacular journalism of the anti-caste movement, and I have worked on the early 20th century period, and it was through journalism, through the newspaper sources, I wanted to understand the history of anti-caste movement. So I have been, in fact, I have been thinking about anti-caste question, about about social justice for some time, and this has been part of my curriculum, uh, uh, and which has also drawn me to understand the complexities of the question, and things that are associated with the difficulties that are associated with this question. Yeah, so this is what in fact has also shaped my academic life, and that is pretty much my focus in my
Wonderful.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your rich teaching experience and how many different places you've worked at, and really appreciate your wisdom that you're bringing to this podcast to all of our listeners, including myself. We will have a wonderful learning journey, I think, today. So with that positionality statement in the background, is it also fair to say that you are from the south part of India yourself?
No, I am from Maharashtra.
Okay.
I'm from a place called Pune, and
Okay.
yeah, and in fact, I was born and brought up there.
Okay.
Then I also did my college, that is the bachelor's degree from Pune.
Okay.
Then I went
Wonderful.
to Delhi to do my master's and PhD. So South India, in fact, yes, it's as new for me, like any like any non-South Indian. So yes, I am not South Indian, but yes, I can say that I am very close by to this place. I'm from Maharashtra, so it's 600 to 700 kilometers from my place. Although it's very far, it looks very far, but still,
Mhm.
no, it is adjacent state. So
Okay.
yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you for telling us that. It's always good to just geographically know where somebody's located too. So that's great. So we'll go into question number one. And number one is, how do you understand social justice in your discipline as a senior faculty member?
I would say that there are many definitions of social justice, uh, and we can think about social justice in multiple ways. But as far as my position is concerned, and as far as the the institutions, academic institutions are concerned, one of the very important questions that I think uh, you know when we are understanding social justice, I think one of the very important questions that we need to take into account is a very important concern rather is diversity. I think for me, if you ask me what is social justice, I would say social justice is at this moment it's an urge to provide diversity in the institution and and uh, take as many diverse elements into institutions. So which has been a problem for many institutions, particularly private educational institutions. So yes, so social justice, I think, if I want to understand it from my point of view, from my professional point of view, I think it has something to do with uh, with diversity. It has something to do with inclusion. Uh, you know, people from diverse social background need to be incorporated into educational institutions, and this hasn't been uh, this hasn't been very successful. There are few places, there are few public universities that have been following this principle. In fact, places very the government universities, public universities have been very good at it. Uh, but when it comes to private institutions, we don't have that we don't find diversity very much playing out.
All right, thank you very much for sharing a little bit about social justice. So just to recap, the way that you understood social justice is through a lens of diversity and inclusion,
Yeah,
and in the institution. And just for clarity's sake, your university, is it a public or a private institution?
it's a private university.
Okay, all right. That's helpful to know. Good. All right. So with that definition in mind, in your particular discipline of the humanities, correct? Especially within history?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll move to question number two. Number two is, what, if any, are the social justice issues you have encountered in your area of expertise?
I would say that there is, in fact, uh, when it comes to discipline, or generally, in fact, there has been uh, a, an indifference uh, about social justice issues. There has been a lot of prejudice about certain questions. So it is not just the caste question, but the gender question has been generally misunderstood. And uh, and I think this indifference and prejudice has played a very, very if not decisive, but a significant role in shaping the way social justice question is understood. I think yes, it is not just confined to my my area of studies, but it is something that one can find it very, very evidently in other areas also. So there is, in fact, a very, very evident indifference about caste question. Indifference about, like, particularly caste question becomes a very fearful subject to to understand, to absorb. And the other thing is that obviously it has been understood in a manner that also that doesn't help the question to be thought creatively. So it if not stigmatized, it is an issue, it is a concern that is, understood with a lot of prejudice.
Okay, so the biggest issue around social justice, your field and others, as you've mentioned, is this indifference and prejudice towards caste and gender identity, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you talk about that it's a fearful subject and it's often stigmatized, can you tell me why you would characterize it like that? Why is it fearful to talk about caste and gender, or particularly caste?
This is my experience that although everyone, particularly after 1990s, what we see is that caste question became one of very important questions in Indian academia, and it was it could be seen through the proliferation of writings in the late 90s, from since 1990s, and yeah, people talking about it more and more in the public sphere, particularly in the academic writings. But also there has been, particularly in the last 10 years, what I see is that obviously, that that favorability about of caste question has come down. But yes, caste question is still considered as one of very important questions, and I think people also look at it very seriously. Scholars are doing it very seriously. It has become one very important question, but I think there is a fear to in fact to encounter it, because it's a question that also deals with our everyday lives. It's a question that that we can't just be sitting and talking from outside. It also informs us, shapes us, and we are also part of it. And so it becomes very difficult for anyone to in fact think about it by distancing it. So I think it also ends up either invisibilizing the question completely, or trying to argue that things have become better. I'm not saying that things haven't become better. It has become better. If you compare it with say 1950s and 60s, obviously in the last 50, 60 years things have become much better. But still, there is a large section of population in India which still has to encounter the caste question on an everyday life basis. So it is something that they just can't do away with. And I think this is where uh, many of our many of our academics also, I think they generally take it for granted, and it is here they in fact feel that these movements or caste question, whenever it is raised primarily because there people are just emotional, or there is the people just don't know how to associate their their concerns, and therefore they get into very they get into communitarian logic. They in fact they become they become more say for example, if Dalits are facing problems, so they become more oriented towards Dalit movement, Dalit community, and so on and so forth. So I think the problem that these, at least the large section of Dalit population uh, face, is not in fact taken into account, and we in fact tend to think that this is something that that has been sorted, at least to some extent. So there is a fear. There is a fear in that way to also to encounter yourself, and I think that is something that is uh, that is something that also impedes many of us to think about caste.
Okay. Okay, that's very helpful. It's very interesting how you know, characterized this challenge that sometimes different social classes um, sort of use to think about why there are movements within the Dalit community instead of actually addressing their own difficulties in their everyday life. So it seems like there's a structural problem, but when the Dalit community mobilizes itself and tries to draw attention to that, that is not looked favorably upon by most castes because they don't see it like that. They want the Dalits to just deal with it by themselves individually. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. And then the other piece is part of the reason why there's not a head-on addressing of this issue of caste identity is because some people actually fear their culpability within that because they partake in it, right? So some people are privileged by the caste system, and some people are very much disadvantaged by the caste system. And perhaps that has something to do with their level of fear of, having real hard discussions about it. Is
Yeah,
that, would you agree? What do you think?
yeah. I completely agree with it.
Okay. All right. So with that in mind, let's move to number 3. Question number 3 is, what are some social justice initiatives that are occurring in your discipline to help build awareness and or address social justice issues? So how
Yeah.
are we addressing this very problem?
I was not able to understand the question when you said what are the social justice initiatives that are occurring in my discipline. Can you elaborate on this question?
Sure. So so you're in the humanities, you have identified a big issue around caste-based discrimination. So you've identified gender-based discrimination, inequity based on those two identity categories. Is there anything that the scholars in the humanities or in the histories particularly are doing to sort of draw attention to how we can solve those problems, how we can address those problems? Like, is there something in terms of, like, in the past, I've heard people start a grassroots movement, or some people put on workshops, or some people do professional training. Is there something that your colleagues and you are doing to address these matters?
I see. Yes, it is not just our colleagues, but generally, academic institutions have become far more sensitive towards caste question. So I think, in the last 10 years or so, what we see is there has been a very conspicuous increase in the number of faculties, coming from different backgrounds, especially, those coming from, the oppressed backgrounds, which are called scheduled castes or scheduled tribes, there is another category, other backward classes, OBCs. We at least in the last 10 years or so, or 15 years, we can see a very conspicuous, very evident increase of people from this group. Uh, but institutions have also been, in fact, trying to encourage people from these communities. But as I said, that most of the time, what happens is that it's a it becomes something that they have to do to some extent, at least, they have to, check box the this point, by, say, recruiting one person from this community. But otherwise, when it comes to the faculty, the demography of faculty, like 99% or more than 90%, at least in the private universities, don't belong to this community. So, but what I would say, and to answer your question, at least, uh, there has been there has been a very conspicuous sensitivity to this question, which has pushed institutions to, to incorporate people from diverse backgrounds. So that is one, I think, one very positive development that has happened. And and I think, as I said earlier, that people are discussing caste, discussing gender very prominently, and it has become one of the central questions of academic scholarship. So so caste is not just now, is uh, seen outside academia, but it has become a very important academic category. And there are studies. Obviously, the problem is that there has been a lot of fear to encounter caste, but it's also because many Dalits and many tribal scheduled tribes and other communities have entered into academia, and this question has therefore become an important question. So it has also changed the 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 overall contours of academia. So yes, I think that is also one of the changes that I see.
Okay, wonderful. So it does add to the diversity of who's in the institution, but it doesn't necessarily change at the faculty level and the composition. And I'm sure that we can openly declare the implications of not changing faculty are pretty big, because how are people from those oppressed backgrounds, whether they're scheduled tribes or other backward classes, how are they seeing themselves reflected in the faculty or in the curriculum, or having a voice in what's being taught beyond being a check mark to meet the requirements of, affirmative action policies that require a certain number of students from these backgrounds to partake, right? I think
Yeah.
there's strong implications for that. And I wonder, just as on a side, like, if you've ever seen anything sort of bubble up to the surface from those people, those students who come to class and come to school in your institution that do identify with these marginalized communities. Have they ever said anything about how their experience is there when it comes to them speaking about from their lived experience? Is that invited into the class space, or is that something that's left out of discussion, like you don't go there?
No, in fact, we don't have many students generally coming from these communities.
Okay.
Although, even if they are there, they don't want to identify themselves, and for right reasons.
Okay.
Uh, as people from this community. But the
Okay.
other problem that I or the other point that I missed was that
Okay.
it is not as if that this representation is not followed. Like, if you look at the public universities, you will find there is, in fact, a large representation of people coming from these communities. But what is happening, and this is something that, in fact, makes this question a serious question, because when it comes to English-speaking academia, and especially the elite English-speaking educational institutions, sorry, these institutions have become the centers of certain few people, although people from so-called oppressed communities are also welcome to join the place, but again, it becomes very difficult for many of them to be part of these institutions. So so yes, you will find one or two there, but generally you don't, in fact have any any representation as such. So, like, public universities, like very prominent public universities of India, uh, at least since 2005-6 onwards, they have been very particular to include people from this community, faculty members from this community. students were also, in fact, their representation was also uh, was also their representation was also taken very seriously much before 2005, and you'll see that a large population of people coming from these communities have been there, have been active in the public universities. But these public universities, especially in the last uh, at least 10 years, we see is that they have they have, if not collapsed, they have crumbled down, and uh, and and that is in fact causing uh, you know uh, displacement of many students coming from these universities, because at least once upon a time these universities used to also be avenues of employment, at least play not avenues of employment as such, but it became a good avenues to you know uh, get employed, like through the name, through the tag of that university. But in 5 7 years things have changed, but there are other changes that have occurred, like this people coming from oppressed backgrounds, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, have also been been going and they like have also been serious about academic research, and they have been like very very like their participation has also increased. But nevertheless, my point here is that when it comes to private institutions, like public institution is at least representation issue is sorted to some extent. But when it comes to private institutions, things are very different. Now, when it comes to elite educational institutions, things are far more different. Uh, and you don't find like the caste question, or caste question, in fact, is not a commonsensical question. Whenever it is invoked, it is considered as something that would encourage sectarianism and so on and so forth. But generally, if you look at the composition of many of the private universities, you will find that these universities have been you know uh, places where certain few communities have coming from the upper echelons of society have been dominant. But they are not very very I'm not saying that they are not forthcoming, but there is this lack of exposure or understanding about the complexity, about the gravity of the situation, that there are no almost no people from no representation from these communities.
So,
So yeah.
So Dr. Pohl, do you think that they're just not aware of the gravity, or is it a conscientious choice? Because you started off our podcast by saying that many people don't want to talk about the caste
Yeah.
issue. And now we're talking about elite private institutions where faculty and students don't want to talk about this matter because it doesn't even come up. It's seen to be something that's not worthwhile for a conversation. And the reason why it's not worthwhile for a conversation in those elite private institutions, is it because that there is this level of fear, or is it because there is this level of we don't really understand what the big deal is in talking about it? Or is it a bit of
Certainly.
both?
Yeah. No, certainly there is a fear, but also, in fact, like most universities, private universities,
Mm-hmm.
the university is also not not centered on humanities and social sciences. My university is basically a medical university also.
Okay.
University that is mostly dominated by the
Okay.
engineering discipline. So medicine and engineering are two very important disciplines that are taught here. So yeah, again, like the situation, the context also changes when you are discussing these questions, or when you are dealing with this question. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, in this scenario. So yes, I think at least to some extent, social sciences and humanities would be, prepared to at least have some discussion with you on this question. But when it comes to other disciplines, it becomes very
Mhm.
difficult because
Okay.
there is no exposure to that question. So it
Okay.
is like, as far as humanities and social science faculty are concerned, like I would say, the faculties across institutions in India, there is faculties from social sciences and humanities. There is, in fact, as I said, a certain fear to encounter the caste question. But when it comes to people coming from outside social science and humanities, there I would say that it it is not just fear, but also lack of exposure to this question. And whenever this question is taken up, or it is invoked, it is in fact understood as if, like, we are taking up some sectarian question, and this sectarianism should be is averse, should be in fact done away with as early as possible. So that aspect is also there, which we need to take into account.
That's very interesting. Thank you very, very much. Yeah. It's interesting because in Canada, those very professions of engineering and medicine look very closely on how to support marginalized populations. And a lot of it is the main focus. So like, for example, at our institution, we have a really strong nursing program, and the nursing program does its very best to support Indigenous populations and creates remote clinics and creates remote opportunities to be able to address the needs and identities of those who are very, very disadvantaged. So it becomes more central in our practice here, at least in some of the medical facilities that I have seen here. And also within engineering, it's about creating accessible housing or accessible access to water or basic human rights that people need. So engineers have tried to help and support marginalized communities as best as they could. And so the question around discrimination against marginalized communities is often thought about, even in different professional disciplines. So it's very interesting to hear this juxtaposition between how India's private institutions think about it and who thinks about these questions and who doesn't talk about these questions. So I really
I just
appreciate that. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just want to make one correction, that it's not just
Sure.
private institutions,
Okay.
but I'd say that, institutions mostly, say for example, if you take social sciences and humanities out of any educational institutions, not just private institutions, but even the public institutions, there has been
Mhm.
a very, very, conspicuous indifference about caste
Um,
questions. Like one of very premier management institutions in India have
Yeah.
been very, very indifferent to caste question. They, in fact, the affirmative policy, the reservation policy
Hmm.
was not applied, no, was not implemented for a long time. It was only through the
Okay.
intervention of the court, the Supreme Court. They were able to they were able to implement reservation policy in such institutions. So it is not just the private institutions, the public institutions, particularly, I'm saying the elite institutions, which
Yeah.
are not which are not centered around social sciences and humanities. They have also been equally very indifferent.
Okay. So it's in both public and private
Yeah,
institutions.
yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that honest insight with us. That's very helpful. So we'll move to question 4, and this is more a personal one. And so you can share as much or as little as you would like. So number 4 is, how do you respond to microaggressions or forms of discrimination, if any, that you have experienced?
I I frankly speaking, I don't have an answer, because it is not as if, like, I have a formula, or I have a method uh, that I keep on using time and again. but yes, I think at one level, one can address this problem by being assertive, uh, and if you are assertive enough, I don't know, I'm just thinking it aloud.
Okay.
If you're assertive enough, I think that this can be uh, at least uh, at least I would say that people are aware that one doesn't have to, mess with or, you know, uh, create any problems. But otherwise, like, the problems are there are different problems, and I'm not saying that people say, particularly coming from the marginalized communities, are at the receiving end all the time, like day in day out, like they are just at the receiving end. But there is a certain I would say, like, yeah, there is a certain consciousness, particularly on part of people coming from these backgrounds, that although you may not find discrimination, a very overt kind of discrimination, happening in your workplace or in your places where you have studied, but still that latent kind of how to put it across. In fact, this latent uh, not discrimination, but the way the distinctions are made, which also makes people little alert, and it also puts them or it pushes them to connect with their community, with their with their lot, working in this in this field, in this in this profession. So I think like one is to be assertive. Second is to organize, uh, and at least organize with the faculty members uh, from the same community, from the same from the same background, um, across across institutions. So that I think is the other way.
You don't have one particular method to address microaggressions or discrimination, but you would think, as being assertive and organizing a collective group of people, whether it's faculty members inside your faculty across different institutions to support, uh, to provide support to the person who has been harmed. Is there anything in particular that you can recall where there was really a strong experience of discrimination towards you as a faculty member or as a student? Have you ever had anything like that personally?
As a faculty member, I don't think I face that kind of discrimination. And the other thing has always been very, very a hub of it, has been a place uh, that produced very important leaders of anti-caste movement. We have
Hmm.
Jyotirao Phule in the 19th century, and the early and Dr. Ambedkar in the early 20th century. So
Yes.
that obviously that background so played a very important role. So I don't think that I faced that kind of discrimination, or
Okay.
yeah, and like as a faculty member, I don't have any issues. I have other problems. Like I am saying that the problem is, at least when it comes to academic institutions, it is, at least in my perspective. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that this is something that is that is that is applicable everywhere. Uh,
Hmm.
but I would say that one thing which is very clear, there is a very, very categorical indifference to caste question,
Okay.
and there is a fear that which I have already
Talked about. Okay.
mentioned. But when Like I have uh, known people in who were studying with me, uh, who have, like, in premier educational institutions. You will find, these students coming from marginalized backgrounds facing the problem.
Right.
Uh, so that uh, something that I think was very uh, at least, it was there, the discrimination, or at least that very acute awareness of
Okay.
being marginalized was that was very uh, evident, at least among the marginalized communities. But things have
Mhm.
changed. But I'm not saying, like, this is what I feel. Maybe, people from, people working in different academic institutions may have a different say, because,
Right.
these places have also been very, like many other places, not here at
Hmm.
least, but have been places of antagonism
That's
for
right.
the
Okay.
people coming from different communities. So that is something I think, it is there. This is not as if, like, it's not an issue.
Okay. Okay. All right. So then we'll move to question 5. Thank you very much. Where do you turn to for inspiration and support when dealing with structural or policy inequities, if any, that you face in your field?
Again, I was struggling to understand this question.
Okay.
I got the question, but
Mm-hmm.
I think, as far as inspiration is concerned, I would say that, one of the reasons why caste question became an important question in the 1990s, it is not because this is my view, that
Okay.
that it is not because caste question was pursued by academics
Okay.
for a long time, and it was out of that engagement, caste question became an important question in the 1990s. It is, in fact, caste question became a central question in academia, primarily because of the social political churning that India was witnessing in the decade of the 1990s. In fact, it was in this context needs to be understood.
Yes.
I think, the ground uh, activism, which also shaped caste question in academia, uh, also was a very important factor in making caste an important, category uh, of discussion in academia. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that yes, caste has become a very important question of late, but it is not because of a very sustained persuasion done by academics, but it is because of the you know the because of the this, social political, churnings that happened in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, in the 1990s, that in fact, helped caste to become an important question. So to address your question, to answer your question, I think, if there is any inspiration that
Mm-hmm.
I think, that would, in fact, would help, sort this question. I would say that these movements, ground movements, even if they are
Mm-hmm.
not existing in the same manner as it used to, say, 20 years ago, still, though these movements, the ground activism, rather,
Mm-hmm.
activism, anti-caste activism, I think is a hope,
Okay.
that in fact, provides, scholars like me, inspiration
Okay.
to think positively and hope to be hopeful about about society, about India, about academia.
Yeah, and to create some change and,
Yeah,
offer some hope that we're moving forward in a progressive manner that supports everyone, right?
yeah.
Okay, so thank you for your answer to question 5. We'll move to the last question. And the last question, Dr. Pohl, we have for you today is what are some possibilities and recommendations that you have to help promote social justice education in your discipline?
Firstly, I think, any institution, if it has to thrive, it has to, in fact, include diverse population. You can't do away with diversity at all. So I think one of the problems that most institutions, and it is not. I'm not saying that these are doing it consciously. Some are doing consciously, some aren't doing consciously, because there is, in fact, a thinking that the moment we uh, think about things from caste perspective, there is a possibility of this question become there is a possibility that we might enter into a very tricky terrain of sectarianism, but that is not the case. In fact, you know if we in like if you look at the histories of, like, if you look into the histories of universities that thrived in the post independence era in India, you will find that many of those universities that have included social justice as an important principle, uh, to include students from diverse backgrounds, have succeeded a lot. Like, for instance, Jawaharlal Nehru University is one such university which was very particular, at least in terms of including people from diverse backgrounds. So I think that was one of the reasons why it also became a very, very successful institution in terms of its reach. People, the reputation it got was also, it has something to do with the inclusion. And again, like, it is not as if, like, JNU right from the beginning was in favor of it. But it was obviously, in the 80s, 90s, you would see a very different possibility emerging in JNU, which also pushed JNU to become what it is today. But yes, when it comes to other institutions, I would say that that aspect is completely lacking. It is only the government, especially in the public universities, it has to push for social inclusion, primarily because there's a constitutional mandate, and that just to fulfill that mandate, governments or courts, in fact, are pushed to take up this matter actively. Otherwise, we don't see that kind of enthusiasm. And this is something, I think, this is very basic. Like, if any university, any institution, if it has to thrive, and if it wants to thrive, if it incorporates people from diverse backgrounds, I would say, like, and I'm very sure that it would create magic in country like India. But that is never taken seriously. So that is one area where I would say that the institutions should be should be focusing on. The other, as I had already mentioned, that there should be a certain sensitivity to caste question. And and it is not just caste. Uh, uh, whenever we discuss or invoke caste question, caste is generally understood only to be associated with Dalits, with scheduled castes, as if, like, that is the caste has become the burden. It is to be carried only by Dalits. But it is a question which is very pervasive, which is very much present across different castes. And there is, in fact, no, I would say, no sensitivity, or we haven't come up with a with an instrument to deal with caste, with not just caste discrimination. Like, caste is not just about caste discrimination, but the way caste has been invoked, like, it becomes very easier for a for an upper caste to flaunt his caste. Like, say, Tamil Brahmin becomes Tam Bram. But you can't, you won't see a Dalit or a tribal flaunting that anyway, if he flaunts, then he is in fact understood, or he's considered as a as a chauvinist or as sectarian. But Tambram is like a very it's a category which is never ever like the moment it is like there are many people even in academia, outside academia, they they flaunt this. Like the most sensitive people also in fact flaunt that they come from Tambram community. But you don't have that space for Dalits to say that, oh, I come from I come from this community, or I'm this or that. That space is not available for that. So I think that sensitivity to caste question beyond discrimination. Discrimination is one thing, like obviously I think that has been there, like that question has been there for a while, and now at least that people are also introduced, people have some idea about it. But this caste consciousness, that that we don't have much understanding of how to understand caste. I
Yes.
think that is missing in the yeah. So in many academic institutions, not just academic institutions, but even outside academic institutions, you will see
Mm.
that is like inclusion and this lack of consciousness of
Mm-hmm.
how to handle caste, how to deal with caste. So
How
most
to
of them
address
like
it.
end up just flaunting it. And when Dalits or tribals flaunt their caste, they are, or tribal identities, they are they are considered as like chauvinists and people who are like antithetical to the principles of diversity and so on and so forth.
Okay. Throughout this interview and this podcast, you've really spoken a lot about sectarian. They're seen to be sectarian. Can you just clarify that for our viewers, who are listening in? What do you mean by that?
And no, it has something to do with history of India, modern
Mm-hmm.
history of India. Nationalism emerged in the 19th century,
Right.
and it became, at least when it began to emerge, it started advocating for a unified voice that
Mm-hmm.
would take into account the questions or representations uh, concerns beyond communities. And
Okay.
so nationalism was often understood uh, as a category uh, opposite to sectarianism. So nationalism stood for
Okay.
unity. Uh, Sectarianism stood for disunity. But again, like that's a very like right from the late 19th century, that has been the way the politics in India was done. But that I would say was also very caste blind way of dealing with with politics.
Yes.
So there is, in fact, like in the garb of, say, this very glorified terms, what we also see is that these questions are never ever, like caste questions are never taken really, like religion whenever it is invoked, and particularly when it comes to certain religions, they are looked at with a lot of suspicion.
Right.
So yeah, the word that I have used, sectarianism, comes from that context. So generally, sectarianism is one of very important subjects. Sorry, one of the very important words that Indian nationalist movement has given to us.
Right.
So like, there is
Okay.
nationalism, there is sectarianism, and sectarianism is often like discussed and invoked time and again. So, and whenever sectarianism is invoked, it is invoked as if like it's something that we need to just do away with as early as possible. But this
Mm.
sectarianism also, to some extent, uh is never understood. Like whenever
Right,
Dalits are, say for example, trying to organize themselves, they
right.
are stood as sectarians. So this is something I think, like, that the term in fact has been informed and shaped by this history, and that therefore, in fact, that's the reason why I have used this word a lot.
Yeah, no, and that's a very good point for all of the listeners to understand because I think it's important to recognize how there's this dichotomy between nationalism and sectarianism, and how those are seen to be very separate and almost polar. One is for unity and one is for segregated communities. But what's interesting in it is that it's not until you get to the individual communities you actually understand the need and identities of each of those communities, because India is a massively diverse nation, from language to ethnicity to religion to different social classes. It has everything in it. So it's interesting to see, if everyone wants to hold on to a nationalistic view and not actually embrace the very identity. So I would, listening to you speak and your recommendation at the end of the beauty of diversity within the institutions creates the richness. I wonder if we could take that same mentality onto the nation and think about how, if we actually acknowledge the diversity within the nation of India, perhaps that will bring even more creative and robust ways of moving forward for the entire society, instead of wrapping it all into one sort of lens of nationalism or one unified voice, having the strength be in the diversity.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's wonderful. Thank you so very much for all your insights. This was excellent. I really enjoyed our conversation today. I really appreciate you taking your time. I know it's a weekend there, but thank you so much to all of,
Thank
to the listeners and to you for all of the nice wisdom and insights you've provided. It's been a very enjoyable time.
Yeah, yeah. Same here. In fact, I also should thank you and Miss Juliana Montero for providing me this opportunity to speak to you and share my ideas, share my views with you.
We are
Thank you.
honored and privileged to have you on the podcast. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.